All right, next up, we are having a fireside chat. It's a fireside chat with Jonathan Lee, Director of Engineering at Moneybox, and Andy Kennedy, Director of Solutions Engineering, UK and Ireland at Cloudflare. Now, they're going to talk about how Moneybox offloaded operational complexity without expanding their infrastructure team, and importantly, how to stay compliant in a heavily regulated environment. Please welcome Andy and Jonathan to the stage. Oh, and a quick reminder, we do have some roundtables happening, so if you are in a session, please just check your agenda quickly.
Well, thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. Personally speaking, this is my first time at CTO Craft, and yeah, I've heard some great dialogues and conversations with our peers, so delighted to be here. And we're going to continue on that vein today with a conversation with John Lee from Moneybox in a moment. If I may, however, just to frame the conversation so that we're all on the same page, I would love to share just a few brief highlights about Cloudflare and what we do, just in case some of you might not be familiar in the audience. So for those of you that maybe have browsed the internet, you might have seen us from time to time pop up, basically our bot management solution to ask, are you human? But that is only just one thing that we do. We do several other things as well. And really, I wanted to just focus on three topics today. The first is the work that we do effectively to help build a better internet. And the first thing we do about that is around our security controls. So beyond just that are you human bot management element, we'll talk today about how we do things like web application firewalls, distributed denial of service protection, and API protection as a set of controls. What you might not know as well is that we also offer services for internal users as well as employees. So for those of you that have adopted the zero trust principles, we offer a secure service edge platform. Beyond that, not only do we make the internet more secure, but we also try and help make the internet more performant. And we do that through things like a content delivery network, but also extending that secure service edge with zero trust network access to provide a secure access service edge. And lastly, not only do we help secure and make the internet more performant, but also we hope we can offer a credible alternative to the way that we've deployed applications in the past. So for many of you, you will have built and deployed applications in a centralized manner, whether that be on-premise in a data center or in a cloud provider in a particular zone or region. At Cloudflare, we try to invert that model, and by default, we actually deploy our applications globally. So basically, the region that we deploy to is Earth, so across 300 locations worldwide. We also offer stateful compute at the edge, which is something that effectively there is no parallel in the industry today, that allows us to do things in terms of providing a new way to build and scale applications. And lastly, because of coupling the compute and storage together with our network, it means that we can do things like offer services such as storage with no egress fees and no wait time on serverless functions. But whilst we can do those things, in effect, we're providing a cloud-native security, connectivity, and developer platform, today we sit in front of about 20% of the world's internet. And with a simple configuration change, effectively, people use us to provide better security, performance, reliability, observability, and privacy. But we also do three more things than that, and that's where we're going to focus with John today. The first is going to be, how do we effectively help organizations scale efficiently with their use of their technology strategy? The second is, how do we help with feature velocity? How do we get new services to market more quickly than maybe alternatives? And then lastly, when we're working in regulated industries, I just mentioned that we can deploy globally at scale, then there are conversations we also have to have around things like sovereignty. So we're going to talk about how we deal with the constraints around working in a regulated industry. So with that in mind, I'm going to have a conversation with John today just to understand a little bit about how you've done it at Moneybox. So John, may I say firstly, thank you for joining us. So John, you've been working with Cloudflare for a while, but before we talk about that, how did you end up at Moneybox, and what's your role at Moneybox? And actually, what is Moneybox?
Thank you. So I was lucky enough to join Moneybox right at the beginning, through serendipity, I suppose. And so it was about 10 years ago, and I joined from the beginning, was like, built the first version of the app, got that out to market, and then have grown with the company ever since. And so at the moment, I look after the service technology department, where we're responsible for the core business system that is Moneybox. So that is onboarding customers, taking them through AML, KYC, taking them through the onboarding journey, getting them to choose a product that's suitable for them, and then collecting their money, investing it into the stock markets or through cash accounts, and then doing the reverse when they want to get their money out. what we're building at Moneybox, so I think I've probably given some of the game away there, but we're building what we think is going to be the category-defining wealth management platform in the UK. So it's our belief that everybody should be able to feel wealthy and have the confidence that comes along with that. And so we do that via offering a range of investing accounts. So we do ISAs, we do LISAs, we do self-invested pensions, along with a range of cash accounts, but all with a long-term mindset. And so the goal is to help people at every stage of their life journey, whether that's building an emergency fund, whether that's saving for their first house, for their children, or planning for retirement.
Fantastic. So you're kind of helping empower people to really achieve their financial goals. And I think today, just if I did my research actually before I came down, and you've got, what, 1.7 million customers today? And you're adding, what, about 500,000 every year, which is fantastic growth. And I think you've got about 19 billion pounds of assets under management. So yeah, I mean, I guess across many different metrics, John, I guess Moneybox has seen that phenomenal growth. And kind of underpinning that is the tech stack that really not only has to be able to scale to support that growth, and indeed we heard this morning actually from Holland and Barrett, and they talked about the fact that they were hitting those limits, those ceilings very quickly, and they had to refactor their entire architecture. But also you have to be secure by design. And I guess what many in the audience might be interested in hearing is just your kind of thought process really about how you kind of reconcile that natural tension in being able to build at scale, but also being able to do so securely.
Thanks. So right from the beginning, security was obviously of the utmost importance, dealing with people's money, with their livelihood. So it's been core at the heart of what we do. But we also made a very deliberate design choice in that we didn't want to do that ourselves, right? So we wanted to focus on building features for our customers and building our business rather than having to worry about infrastructural concerns. And we were lucky enough to be born in the age of platform as a service, and we sort of rode that wave of platform as a service as it really started to get into its stride. So everything is built upon, we use Azure as one of our core partners, so that's kind of our data center, so everything's built on app services and all sort of cloud-native technologies, and then we wrap that with Cloudflare. And we're basically outsourcing the components of our stack that we would rather not focus on and outsource to professionals that are the best in the business, the people that have built the technology actually themselves, and so are best placed to operate it.
Makes sense, and I guess strategically you made that decision to partner with the likes of Cloudflare and another provider to help try and incorporate those controls. Part of it would be obviously with the intent, okay, we want to provide that security, but were there any kind of things that maybe were consequences that were maybe unforeseen around maybe efficiency gains? Maybe it helped the team focus on other tasks. Was there anything there that you got that maybe was a little bit of a surprise that wasn't just immediately like, yeah, we're just going to provide like DDoS protection or something like that?
I think one of the biggest things has been when we were small, we didn't have that much attention, right? And as you get bigger and untoward attention, right? So as you get bigger, you suddenly do become the target of larger DDoS attacks that you're not kitted out to defend against. And the benefit of having Cloudflare at the front is that when we got targeted with such attacks, so it's beyond sort of IP-based rate limiting, it's coming from multiple IPs. We basically had a call with our account manager, explained the situation, and almost overnight we went from having IP-based simple rate limiting to having signature-based rate limiting based on machine learning. So using bot detection to get the signature of who's trying to attack you, and then rate limit them on that basis. And so that is, I mean, obviously super important to us. Without we have to defend against attackers, but at the same time we have to allow people access to their services, to see their money, to be able to trade, and so you need to do both at the same time. It's an incredibly complex domain. It is not what we specialize at. It's not what we want to specialize at. And so we're more than happy to offload that to competent professionals like Cloudflare.
And of course, as a UK-focused business, I suggest the attacks may be coming from countries outside the UK, so having that kind of benefit of maybe the protection of 330 locations around the world, just being able to sync that bad traffic at its source rather than bringing it all back to the UK and then dropping it. Makes sense?
Exactly. We also have customers obviously on holiday, etc., and they have to be able to access their money when they're on holiday. So it's not as simple as sort of blocking out regions of the internet. You've got to be fairly open, but we get the right balance of that with bot detection and advanced rate limiting, where we can accept the traffic we want and block out the rest, sleep easily at night.
Makes sense. So maybe coming back then on the decision to partner, were there any kind of design principles that you've kind of formed in that process that maybe help provide clarity, that really governs what you seek to do in-house versus you say, you know what, we're going to do that with a partner?
So the underlying principle is that we want to specialize in things that add value to our customers. So that is anything that affects the customer journey, anything that is secret source to kind of Moneybox and what makes the experience unique, and then outsource the rest. And as an example, we have built our own investing platform. So we've built that from the ground up, and we're one of the few financial companies in the UK that do investing, as in stock and equity investing, as well as cash accounts on the same platform. So that gives us full vertical integration of our customer journey, and it allows us to build innovative new experiences that are integrated in ways that other of our competitors are less able to do, because they're using an aggregator model where they've got outsourced people to do for their investing for their cash accounts, and they're providing a layer over the top. So that basically allows us to be innovative within financial products within the UK, and that's where we choose to focus our attention, and then leave the rest to people that know.
Makes sense. So obviously in the financial services industry, the core foundation is around regulation, compliance, that mandate that you have to kind of adhere to. And it's kind of a little bit of a counterpoint in terms of in the fintech space, and given the rapid growth you've gone through, you're trying to move fast, right? You're trying to accelerate at scale. But I guess, how have you been able to kind of reconcile that, or how have you been able to maybe leverage likes of a Cloudflare or others to help make sure that that isn't painful in terms of you're able to maintain that velocity, that feature velocity you described?
So we have deliberately kept our architecture simple. We rely on a monolithic architecture. So I mean, for the first 4 years, we just had a single monolith that made Moneybox tick. When we built our investing platform, that's when we went out into a distributed architecture. But again, we just added another monolith. So the building blocks underneath are fairly simple. They're connected together with, again, sort of simple messaging rather than sort of a complicated microservices architecture. And so that offloads the complexity from the engineers. When they're building features, they don't need to keep in mind the sort of various moving parts. Simplicity is part of security, as we've heard from talks prior to this. And so that offloads the complexity onto of the engineers. We then wrap everything with Cloudflare, and so Cloudflare then deal with security at the edge for us, allow us to focus on our core business. And there's actually been another knock-on effect from that, which is one of the ideas that we wanted to go after from the beginning was creating a structurally low cost to serve platform. And we have achieved that through this use of simplicity, right? Within a technology department, obviously the cost to serve is wider than that, but within technology, the simplicity has really enabled that low cost to serve. And when you compare us to our peers, if you exclude the marketing cost on our average basis to serve a customer, we're about 6 times cheaper than some of our competitors, and that gap is kind of only going to grow as we scale.
Fantastic. That's a prime competitive differentiator, I guess. Maybe then coming to a topic where personally, representing Cloudflare, we want to talk about things like consolidation risk, but also availability risk and operational resilience. As a regulated industry, you've got things like the Digital Operational kind of Resilience Act. We're thinking a little bit about how do we maintain availability of services in the event of kind of, adversarial kind of circumstances. So I'd love to know a little bit more of how have you been able to approach that conversation, whether it be internally and kind of saying like we're prepared to use these services and accept that we're going to be working with partners. We don't necessarily control everything ourselves, as well as maybe working with regulators and others. So how have you kind of approached that availability risk conversation?
So yeah, operational resilience and availability is obviously at the core of everything that we do, and is a very hot topic at the moment. We the way that we've structured it is that just stepping back a bit, the FCA are very interested in everything that they mandate is all around giving customers good outcomes, right? So that is a constraint, but the plus side of that and the bit that we lean into is that it makes you think about design decisions up front that ensure that customers have access to their funds at all times, that they are able to withdraw for a house purchase at the time that they need when they're dealing with their solicitor, so that there's no hold-up. So we lean into that. And the way I sort of see it is 3 parts, that we've got security at the edge that we've talked about. So we've got security of protecting people coming into our platform, and all the good things of DDoS protection and bot detection, et cetera, and the web application firewall. We then have our system that we maintain, our business domain, and we ensure security there through obviously regular code reviews, code scanning, through architectural decision records, and making sure that those are questioned by sort of the engineers working on a problem domain, and then through sort of externally through penetration testing and red teaming to sort of verify. And so that's the second angle, making sure that our code is secure and is protecting against people trying to steal assets, for example. And then the third angle is around our employees and our internal systems. And so on that front, we use Cloudflare Warp, or I think you might be rebranding that. You're going through a bit of a name change. And essentially the idea here is that we're obviously now working in a hybrid, a lot of companies are working in a hybrid environment where you're working either in the office or at home or in a hotel room, and you expect the same level of access. And so the concept of the corporate network is kind of doesn't really make sense anymore. And so what we've gone now through Cloudflare Warp and always on VPN is that we've essentially pushed the corporate network up into the cloud. So instead of access granted via location, it's via strong authentication through hardware-backed MFA. It's based on identity rather than in any other sort of trust mechanism. And that gives us confidence that our systems are secure. And I think just a little anecdote is that even our corporate network in the office, the office network is not trusted, right? So you have to be on the VPN to get access to anything. That gives us a level of safety that we wouldn't otherwise have in the traditional world.
And I think for some that may be a really kind of important point, because I think many will have maybe started a zero trust program within their organization, but for quite a few, they haven't actually been able to maybe realize the entire value of that. But it sounds like you've made really good progress by kind of taking away that inference of trust associated with your attachment to a network, to a point where you say, well, actually, we're going to connect users to applications, we're going to use identity as the core of it, and making that progress on a zero trust base. And also, listening to you as well, thinking a little bit about, it isn't just about operational resilience, but also, expanding that into things like disaster recovery and understanding the consequences of both. But then we talked about earlier about feature velocity and trying to maintain the pace at which you kind of innovate. And again, there are some natural barriers to that with maybe having to work in a regulated industry. Is there any kind of lessons learned or other kind of experience you could share about how you've been able to sustain and manage that feature velocity in terms of the pace at which you're bringing new features and products, shall I say, into your platform?
It goes back to that concept of simplicity. So we to borrow from Einstein, to keep things as simple as possible, but no simpler. And so we've embodied that in everything that we do. And we adding anybody can add new features, but you've got to do so in a way that you've got to have second order thinking, right? To think about the consequences of those features down the line. And so we always, in everything that we build, we're thinking about a 5 and 10 year horizon. That's the horizon that we're looking out to go, rather than doing something sort of immediate that solves the need now, getting out the door, but then it becoming a sort of shackle further down the line. So there's that concept of simplicity, of sticking with a very simplistic architecture underneath, right? So resisting the call to microservices, which is obviously comes up quite often as people are very interested in it. But again, we sort of pull everybody down to sticking with a simplistic architecture, to solving business problems, as opposed to doing tech for tech's sake. So it's kind of like building upon boring technology, rather than solving something that doesn't need to be solved.
That makes sense. So if we think about applying things like then SRE principles, we think about automation, there's probably people in the room that may be wondering, what were the decisions you made that had maybe outsized influence in terms of being able to scale your business, but not necessarily proportionally scale the team that actually runs the infrastructure. Is there anything there that you would say, actually, these were the things that we kind of really did that had the biggest impact? You've talked about kind of trying to make that infrastructure more simple, et cetera, but is there anything else you might share on that?
It's again, it's into that the outsourcing of infrastructure. So I mean, we didn't have any infrastructure staff at all for Moneybox for the first 6 years. We just had infrastructure-minded engineers that configured together services from the likes of Cloudflare and Azure, and we were safe in the knowledge that they were configured correctly because the defaults were set for us. As we get bigger, suddenly the scale brings complexity, right? And so we have a small infrastructure team, so it's about 10% of our organization, our technology organization is about 5 people that look after our infrastructure and make sure that everything is taking it to the next level, right? So, but making sure that we've got a very, very secure perimeter, that there's kind of one point in that we have the kind of zero trust principles within our zero network, etc. So that's the big leverage point, that we're able to do a lot more with a lot less people, and it's obviously very, very cost effective from a people point of view.
Makes sense. So this morning we had a great keynote talk about how to use, Cloud Code and AI to help basically make CTOs, but also the organization more broadly, be more effective or efficient with their time. Given your experience kind of in the operations space and understanding the engineering team that you've got, what do you think is kind of the thing that's going to have the biggest influence in terms of applied AI into the engineering efforts you've got at Moneybox?
So I'm very much of the mind that the next stage is not going to be lots of different agents working together and creating code, and then quality sharing that code and talking to the product manager is also a bot, and then shipping out a product and putting it into production. Yeah. I think you may get something plausible, but it may not work, and obviously the onus is on us as senior managers within Moneybox to make sure that the things work, that we don't lose people's money. So I don't think we're going to be going down that route with the current iteration of technology as it is, maybe in a couple of years. But where I do see that the next phase of growth is around high agency engineers using AI to extend themselves, right, to become 2, 3, 5, 10x more productive. So doing that allows those engineers to build software at a much faster pace, but still have control over the architecture. And I think, as I was talking about second order effects, you've really got to keep that in mind when you're adding and creating a system, extending a maintainable system. It is not just about writing code, right? Like there's a lot more to a system than writing code. You've got to think about data structures. You've got to think about the systematic design and the second order effects. And if you get those wrong, the decisions compound over time. But they can compound whether they're correct or whether they're wrong. And so you either end up with a system that's really easy to extend in a couple of years, or you can end up in a system that slows you down and basically ends up having to be replaced. And then if we get into the situation where it has to be replaced, you have to do that in an always-on model that customers expect nowadays. That's incredibly difficult, moving from one system to another system and doing so without zero downtime. So I think like that agentic model, I think is obviously got to be proven. But I think that the engineers leveraging themselves at like greater multiples than they ever have done before, I think is the next phase.
Fantastic. Well, you've been very patient in answering my questions. We've got some great questions from the audience, so if I may, should we maybe just jump into those and we'll take them? So we heard you several times that you're more cost efficient than others. Have there been any decisions where maybe you realised later that there was maybe an incidental cost or a projected cost that you hadn't anticipated?
Yeah, databases. Databases, Cosmos database, for instance, right? So I mean, it's very easy to spin up secure databases, obviously within cloud infrastructure, but managing that at scale when you have terabytes of data can be very, very expensive. And so we're always looking at new ways to manage the influx of data coming into our platform and making sure that it's done in an efficient way. Cosmos has a few ways that you can kind of end up shooting yourself in the foot that they don't kind of not sort of immediately advertise. So you've got to be very careful around partition keys and how you structure data for read and write, etc. So that's been one of the biggest costs. And I think out of any infrastructure, databases is probably one of the biggest costs going.
And Bill Shock and FinOps are obviously core to this. But then maybe the next question is, when you outsource a problem, you outsource part of the profit. Again, maybe it's a great question because we've been talking a little bit about the partnership between our companies. Is there a particular metric or volume or size of the business where it makes sense to kind of make that decision to bring it in-house again?
Maybe. And if you, like I think it comes around the number of infrastructure staff that you need. So obviously, cloud. If you look at the likes of Azure and AWS, is not cheap, and so. And doing the bare metal data centers is actually incredibly cheap, but you have to have the people available to make sure that the servers are, your servers are patched, they're upgraded, et cetera. And I suppose that there is a point when you get to a number of infrastructure staff, and maybe that's like, I don't know, 8 or 10 or something like that, where maybe it makes sense to come back inside. But you've got to obviously have a very mindful eye on that and make sure that you are not creating problems for yourself further down the road, as opposed to relying on the giants that we are able to at the moment.
And maybe for both of us, it's playing to our strengths, our relative strengths and our core competencies. Well, look, John, thank you so much for being kind enough to share the stage with us today. Are generally kind of great to hear the stories about what you've done at Moneybox. And with that in mind, we'll hand across to our next speaker. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.